Folks, I don't know about you. Yes, new intro, new setup, new season. Wednesday, the New York Knicks season kicks off for the 2025-2026 season, and with very much big expectations. If anybody's seen the New York sports aesthetic lately, it's been bad. We are relying on the Knicks to save us. But what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Knickscast channel. I am joined by, to my left or to my right, however you see him, Lee Escobedo, who works with the Nick of Time show. And down below, familiar face to the channel, Dylan Backer of Fireside Knicks and Empire Sports Media. Great to have these two gentlemen on. Obviously, they're going to give us some great analysis here, but I'm going to start off with Lee, who is new to the channel. You know, opening thoughts in the Knicks, just opening thoughts in the Knicks. You positive, optimistic, pessimistic? Give us your thoughts.
Jumping all the way out the window, Knicks beat the Nuggets in 7 games in the finals. Round up the season with about 58 wins. I think we're number one in offense, probably 14th or 13th in defense. And Mike Brown's candidate top 3 for Coach of the Year. Brunson's top 5 for MVP. And I think we have a couple of guys on our bench who could be candidates for Sixth Man of the Year in either Hart or Deuce and Bride, depending on who gets a higher usage rate. But I'm really, really excited to have a new voice in the locker room, even though I was a Tom Thibodeau defender at times, not necessarily a fan or supporter, certainly a defender, and was not a fan of Mike Brown. Everything that I've read and watched and talked with other people smarter than me in hoops, I'm becoming more optimistic about how his offense and specifically his voice can take this team to a championship level.
Great positivity. Love that, Lee. Dylan, your first thoughts.
Yeah, so, the first thing I guess we should point out is, of course, it's a brand new system with Mike Brown now. We're no longer with Tom Thibodeau, obviously, and it's no longer that kind of slow-paced offense. It's a whole new look. It's the same roster, essentially, with a couple new pieces, but a completely different feel, right? The team's going to be playing much faster. A lot more threes are going to be put up, and I think that's a good thing. I don't think the Knicks put up enough threes during the postseason last year, and I think that's ultimately what killed them. I feel like a lot of their offense was very stagnant. They weren't moving around a whole lot. With Mike Brown, it's going to be a whole different story. They're going to be moving around a lot more. They're going to be shooting the ball more. Like Lee said, I expect this team to be the top offense. I mean, you have Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns on the same team with a head coach that took the Sacramento Kings to the number one offense. So I have no reason to believe that they cannot do that this season with the talented group that they have now. They also have a much deeper bench, which I'm really excited about. I think Jordan Clarkson and Gershon Yabusele are two very good signings. I don't know how well they're going to play, obviously. I don't know how much they'll play, but nevertheless, they're still impactful signings regardless, because I mean, we had no bench last year. You could look at some of the guys that were on the bench last year that were recently on different teams. They all got waived. I mean, DeLon Wright got waived by the Pacers, then Cameron Payne got waived by the Pacers as well. Precious Achiuwa got waived by the Heat. So it's completely different now. They have a much better roster than they had coming into last season. So I'm excited for it. I expect this team to be very competitive. I fully expect the team to win at least 55 games. I would not even be surprised if they end up winning close to 60. I could be very much wrong about that, but I expect a lot of big things from this team because you made the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and now the Eastern Conference got weaker. So if you're the Knicks, you got better. You got a different head coach. You have a much better system in place, at least what I think. I think you should be a much better team and really show that. And at this point, an NBA Finals appearance should be the expectation. And anything less than that, to me, is considered a failure, in all honesty.
Facts, Dylan, facts. Real quick, before I get into my first thoughts, was up to Jacob. It says, "What's good, fellas?" Jacob is noticing the mustache and the growing facial hair on my lips a little more than usual. He says, "I wonder if Dadier is going to get more run." Definitely interesting. Dadier, second-year player from France. But my thoughts on, and this could be the copium coming from, as I mentioned earlier, that New York sports is an absolute the shitter. But overall with the Knicks, I'm really optimistic. I said at the end of last year, and it wasn't so much like, oh, I hate Tom Thibodeau, because I'll tell you this, and there's a sequence here, obviously, and the Knicks have a ton of pressure on them, but I'll get to that in a second. I was very much a fan of the hiring for Tom Thibodeau. He lasted 5 years, which was great. He set the culture. He brought us to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's great. But I didn't think, and I mentioned this towards the end of the Pacers series, which really became evident, I didn't think he was going to lead us to a championship or be the coach to lead us to the championship. Nonetheless, it doesn't diminish his importance to the franchise. But at the end of the day, with the roster and the direction that the front office was moving, And the coach that they hired, Mike Brown, yes, people say, well, he hasn't got out of the first round since 2012. Look at his Sacramento tenure after that first season, all these different things. And I might have said this on the offseason stream or the Mike Brown stream that we had, breaking down a little bit of the X's and O's. I think Mike Brown's strengths and what he's able to do will benefit the Knicks more than his flaws taking down the team, if you guys know what I'm saying. Because Brown obviously runs, Dylan, you're absolutely right. He runs a fast pace. I mean, not to take a too much stock in the preseason, right? I thought, besides obviously he has to make his threes and he has to play better defense, I thought Mikal Bridges was taking more shots at the rim this time around. And a big thing was like the analytics people were like, hey, listen, for Bridges to be a better player, efficient player, he's got to stop taking these fadeaway mid-range jumpers. More threes, whether it's from the corner or from off the break or at the rim, which Bridges is athletic enough. He has the touch around the rim, which he could do it. So I'm very happy that the Knicks are eventually going to play in a bit of a faster pace offense with more 3-point creation. And Dylan's mentioned multiple times on his Fireside Knicks account and just his personal account, it's going to be a bit of an adjustment. You're going from two different systems. You're going from, Jalen Brunson isolation ball and just sit around and let him watch, run pick and roll, run screen pick and roll, all these different things where it's Mike Brown is a completely different aesthetic in terms of the offense. I'm not sure about the defense. They probably, in my opinion, are probably a middle of the pack defensive team. It obviously depends how Mike Brown employs certain lineups. But I'm definitely excited. I'm definitely excited about the season. We'll obviously give our predictions. I know Dylan and Lee already did, but I'm going to save mine for the end. But from all the positivity, and this is not so much the negatives, but let me ask you guys this. With the positivity you guys put on, I'm going to start with Dylan. Do you have any potential concerns with this team?
Yeah, I think the outright concern is health, especially with Mitchell Robinson. I mean, we already know right away that he's not going to play in back-to-backs this year, most likely, and he's going to be load managed. That's one big thing right there. And of course, Josh Hart's dealing with the back spasms right now. We don't know how severe that is or how serious that's going to affect him. He also, I think, had that finger injury that's going to linger throughout the season for him. So, aside from just those two guys, the rest of the team also needs to stay healthy. Last year, they were pretty lucky to I know Jalen Brunson missed a month, but aside from that, they were pretty healthy and they entered the postseason fully healthy. So they were lucky enough to not deal with the, barrage of injuries that they dealt with in the previous postseason. You want to have that same luck this time around, but it's also not guaranteed. I think they did a good job this time around of adding more bench pieces to kind of absorb any potential injuries that may arise. Because if you look at last year, we had to call on DeLon Wright to start games. Now I know he played well, but that was also not expected. You called on a guy who was out of the rotation when Jalen Brunson went down because Deuce McBride also went down at the same time, and so did Cameron Payne. You called on a guy who basically did not play and had gotten traded over here mid-season to start games. And luckily, it worked out, and they ended up winning the 4 out of the 5 games that DeLon Wright did start. But you can't expect the same thing to happen again if, say, Tyler Kolek has to step in that same role or something like that. You got to just hope that the team can stay healthy, and the team obviously needs to play well. Of course, we're over sitting here kind of expecting them to play at a high level, but we got to see how it works. I feel like the first couple games of the season, you're going to see ups and downs just because they're still adjusting to the brand new system of Mike Brown. I think Jalen Brunson especially is going to have to make the most adjustments just because he is the leader of the offense. He's the leader of the team. He's going to be the one running through pretty much the entire offense, right? I feel like we kind of saw him get a little more comfortable in the final preseason game, so that's definitely encouraging. But who knows? When you're facing the actual starters instead of all the third string people, it may feel a little different. So I'm not expecting it to be the smoothest sailing ship outright, but I feel like once they get in the rhythm, this team should be really good. They should be able to beat pretty much anybody in front of them, but it all depends on health. I think that is the one big concern, and I don't even think really that the other guys on the team, we have to worry about injuries so much, but it's always just that one injury that could arise that could break down a lot of stuff. So that's my biggest concern. I think the team just needs to stay healthy, and if they do, I have no reason to believe that they cannot make a finals run. That's really all I got for that.
Lee, potential concerns?
Fully healthy, I only have one, which is Josh Hart's degrading defense. I noticed a pretty significant step back last season, both in transition and guarding pick and roll. His closeouts, I thought, had lost a step as well. He's a very high IQ player and can defend multiple different kinds of coverages. He's plug and play on both ends of the floor. But last year, I was concerned with his inability to guard someone on an island or to guard in pick and roll, which Tibbs did a lot of those pre-switches where Hart would get in for Cat or OG would get in the Cat to try to defend the rim and take Cat out of drop coverage. And Hart, I thought, got really cooked in a lot of those sequences. So that's a concern for me, not just this season, but moving forward, period, especially as we need to pay Mitchell Robinson and then eventually Deuce Bride. He, to me, seems to be the odd man out in order to free up salary so we can pay both those guys. The only injury that really concerns me is Brunson. I think healthy people have been making a lot of concerns around who's a backup playmaker. I think it's by committee. You guys have mentioned earlier that you both expect Mikal Bridges to have the ball in his hands more initially in offense. Definitely agree with that. We saw that in preseason. I think that was a precursor to the real deal starting Wednesday. But if Jalen Brunson is out, then everything becomes staggered. I don't think we have a player right now who can play the point guard position, get everyone involved, have a consistent three in open space, and also to defend in pick and roll coverage. Brunson already is kind of someone who I say he tries really hard, and at his best, he's an average defender. At his worst, he's a net negative. And in pick and roll coverage, using ball screens and horns action, they're going to, whoever that is, whether it's Tyler Kolek or Jordan Clarkson, Deuce Bride's the only one who can handle it. But those other two guys, which would see minutes if Brunson goes down, they are going to get attacked without mercy off the ball screens. And that really concerns me long term. If Brunson's out for 2 days, a little tweaked finger or something, we can sustain. But for a stretch like he did last year, man, that is very concerning because last year we had DeLon Wright and Cameron Payne, two guys at bare minimum are catch and shoot three-point shooters and can defend in transition and pick and roll off of a switch, especially DeLon Wright. We don't have that this year. Jordan Clarkson is a net negative defender, and Tyler Kolek is a cone. So I'm very concerned if a Brunson injury goes down, but thank goodness between Diawara, Trey Jamison, Hut Porty, I think our front court and wing depth is super solid if anyone in that rotation goes down to injury. But Brunson, every team, man, SGA, Cade Cunningham, if any of those guys go down, they're in trouble because that backup player lacks one or two essential qualities. So we're no different than any other contender, maybe with the exception of Cleveland. But that Brunson one is worrisome if it happens either late in the season or, God forbid, once the postseason starts.
Yeah, both great points made in terms of the health aspect. Obviously, Brunson, as Leah mentioned, he was out for a couple games last year. And here's the thing, you obviously have Jordan Clarkson. I view him more as an off-ball guard as opposed to an on-ball guard for playmaking purposes. Tyler Kolek, who I was a fan of last year, especially coming out of college, catch and shoot three-point ability, playmaking ability, really good feel for the game. And I know it's like, for some you can't take so much stock into it. Summer league, he didn't look so great. Preseason, until the last game, I thought he was all right. Lee mentioned he's a traffic cone defensively. He's not great defensively. I think he has a really good game as a passer, but the problem is, I think he should be hitting more threes than he should, number one. Number two, I think he's a little too selfless, in my personal opinion. Like, it's great. Kolek has a great feel for the game. He could run the pick and roll. He knows how to get guys in proper positions. As Lee said about getting downhill, creating for himself, creating for others, is Tyler Kolek going to take that next step? Because he's an older prospect, and also as well, this is a win now team, so you're expecting things a little quicker and a little bit faster. So that's obvious. And I'll tell you this, I don't think Kolek, obviously, maybe it's obvious to some, but not others. But had Malcolm Brogdon not retired, I think Brogdon would have been the backup point guard. I thought he was ideal for that position. Unfortunately, he retired. Did look a little slow in the preseason, but the facilitating and the playmaking behind Jalen Brunson, as in terms of the point guards, is a little bit of worrisome as well. Mikal Bridges, I think he's going to be very good in his role. I'll be honest. If I had any other worry, a lot of people are mentioning the Mitchell Robinson injury because now there's a lot being said by Mike Brown that really isn't of substance. And obviously it depends on how the Knicks handled the injury, but Mitchell Robinson played about three of the 5 preseason games. And now he's been dealing with load management. I don't know what he tweaked specifically, but I think of it two ways, right? You obviously, as a fan, you want him to play Wednesday night, but you also got to think of the long game and say, hey, you know what? Are we going to put our chips in for Mitchell Robinson to be fully healthy or sacrifice his health for game one? Or are we looking at the long game and saying, hey, you know what? I want him ready for May. I want him ready for April. I want him ready for potentially June as well. But Mitchell Robinson, obviously he missed some time last year and then came back. He was phenomenal, especially in the playoffs. I'm excited for him. But again, the injury risk, especially that the Knicks didn't trade him this offseason, and especially that the Knicks didn't extend him, is definitely worrisome. And I think we'll maybe touch on the Giannis rumors at the end. But I would say Mitchell Robinson's health is the most worrying in my opinion. And also as well, not so much for Karl-Anthony Towns. It obviously depends on how Mike Brown, and I'm a little more confident that Mike Brown is going to know the matchups, but how often the lineup navigation is, I think it's more of a, not so much a pessimism thing or a skepticism. It's like very intriguing. Because I'm going to bring this up too. Me and Lee share the same position on what our ideal starting lineup would be. We like the 5 out. Dylan, you like the Towns, Mitchell Robinson lineup where it's the double big, which I'm not against. My preference is personally the 5 out lineup as much as it's Lee's as well. But also you have to figure, and I said this when Mike Brown was hired, just because you run a 5 out lineup doesn't mean you can't run double big. Just because you start the double big line doesn't mean you can't run 5 outs. So it's going to be interesting. I think Towns kind of upset a little people, or I should say people today because of what he said. He was basically like, he asked, what's your role in this new offense? What do you think the role is going to be? And he's like, I don't know. To me, like there's a glass half full and a glass half empty take. There's some people saying, that's not the right answer. There's some people that are saying, hey, you know what? Just get to the season. These players have been asked enough questions. If anybody wants to feed it back off of that, but Lee, I know you like the starting 5, the same contingent as much as I do. But in my personal opinion, if I had to pick, I think Mike Brown's going to go double big if Mitchell Robinson is healthy.
You've said a lot. I'll try to tackle all of them. In terms of fear around Mitchell Robinson injury, I have none. Put him on ice, man. Rest him as much as possible. It's the main reason to tie it into another topic, which is I'm for Deuce and Bride being the starting shooting guard instead of Mitchell Robinson, because you cannot depend on Mitchell Robinson's health. So if you're going to have a double big as your primary shell on offense and defense, you lose so much when you go from Mitch to Hot Porty or Mitch to Trey Jamison or Mitch to anybody else. It's not the same. So you might as well just keep the formation of the big being off the bench and having Cat the 5 and then rotate the guards out when Deuce sits at the 2. But you're not compromising your pick and roll defense, at least at the point of attack, because Deuce can handle that. He's a great screen navigator. And as well, he's becoming better on ball on the offensive side too. But Mitchell Robinson's health throughout the season, I think, is going to be mitigated. And I'm okay with that because we finally have depth. We have one guy who gives you the really solid screens, the really solid down screens, more specifically, playing off of Brunson, which allows guys to cut to the basket in Trey Jamison, who's super sound fundamentally. Then you have Hot Porty, who's not great defensively, sets, I would say, average screens, but is unbelievable attacking the rim and has that I-heart push shot in the mid-range, which preseason showed me with all the different type of double statter screens and horn sets, that mid-range is going to become one of our go-to areas. We're really going to attack with our big specifically operating there on really fast cuts and really fast release shots at the rim. So I'm not real worried about Mitch's health because as long as he's healthy for the playoffs, we've seen him help us win 2 series in the past. And I think he's going to help us win another one in this championship run. Put him on ice and rest him as much as possible because he showed an ability last year with Casey Smith at the head of the health department to be able to back in game shape fairly quickly and at least have his instincts back. So I'm sure with all the different coaches, there's almost an assistant coach for every player now. We've added so many to our staff. There's going to be someone working, whether it's Mark Bryan or somebody else, exclusively with Mitch, keeping him in game condition shape and his instincts sharp. So I'm not really concerned about how long he's out. And finally, to touch on the Karl-Anthony Towns, I'm a little bit older than you guys. I was in my prime during the Isaiah Thomas years. And those were some really dark, depraved days. And I have seen and heard anything that a team can possibly experience that would put you in the absolute purgatory of fandom. So any Freudian slip or misspeak from our players or coaches, I brush it off very quickly because I've seen the Larry Brown 2006 season and nothing can ever compare to the amount of disjointed chaos that season gave me and existential dread. So I'm cool with a little, should he have said more? Possibly. But let's just wait till the season starts and see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think the obvious is we mentioned it already that they're playing in a new system. Dylan, anything you like to add on?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on the starting five thing because you
Mhm.
mentioned how I have a different point of view on that than you two. The reason I am vouching for Mitch to start is because I just don't feel like you can have Karl Anthony Towns be the five anymore. And the reason I say that is not because of the offense. You know, the offense with him at the five was obviously great. He had a great year, but the defense was that bad. And you're not going to shoot 100% from the field. But if you're going to give up so many baskets, you might as well shore up the interior defense. Mitchell Robinson gives you the size and the paint presence that Karl Anthony Towns does not give you at the five. And I know you want to have good perimeter defense, but you had Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby still in the starting five, and the defense still struggled mightily. And now I partially will blame that with Tom Thibodeau. I didn't like his defensive schemes, but at the same time, I do think the personnel kind of played a factor a little bit because I haven't viewed Karl Anthony Towns as a five for years. I mean, we saw him move to the four when Rudy Gobert came over to Minnesota, and they became a top defense in the league. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be 100% replicated with Mitchell Robinson because obviously he's a different player than Rudy Gobert, but also less healthier than Rudy Gobert. But either way, I feel like you just have to do it. I feel like you got to at least try it to see if it works. They did it in the postseason last year, and I know they didn't end up winning the series, but they didn't end up winning 2 more games after they made the switch during that Pacers series. So I think you just got to give it a chance. Now, at the end of the day, I know it doesn't really matter about who starts; it more matters about who's finishing the game. And I do think we're going to be seeing a lot of that 5-out lineup that you guys have been, preaching to start. We will be seeing that. There's going to be stretches of games where we will be seeing that, just because you got to take advantage of having an offensive-minded center that can shoot threes from the literal parking lot. You got to take advantage of that. But at the same time, you want to get Mitchell Robinson out there and be your paint presence and be your anchor because that's your defensive identity right there. We've seen when he's out there how much better the defense overall entirely looks. Not just him, but the rest of the guys on the floor too. They play so much better defensively with Mitchell Robinson out there. So I feel like if you just have him out there for that reason and also for the rebounding and all that stuff, they're going to be fine offensively because if you can turn good defense into good offense, you're going to be set. This team's already going to play with an incredible pace. So if you're able to get more stops defensively and turn them into more transition buckets, they're going to be just fine offensively. You're not going to feel like a big drop off by having Mitchell Robinson out there, a guy who isn't exactly an offensive type player. And from what I have seen in the preseason, he has looked like he's been able to adjust well to the quick pace. I know he's not the fastest runner or anything like that. You want to preserve the guy's health, but he seems fine out there. He doesn't seem like he's running out of shape or anything like that, or running out of gas when he's running with the rest of the guys on the floor. He seems fine. So, me personally, I want that to be the starting five, and I expect it to be. If Mitchell Robinson is available on Wednesday night, I do expect that to be the starting five, just because that was the lineup Mike Brown was using each of those first 3 games. That told me that he envisions Mitchell Robinson starting, and we've also seen that Karl Anthony Towns slimmed down a little bit to play power forward. That tells me that he was told he's going to be playing a lot of power forward this year. We've even seen some quotes from Mike Brown and stuff this year talking about Cat's role, talking about how he'll play a variety of different roles, whether it'll be at the 4, sometimes at the 5, this, that, the other. I expect to see him play a lot of both. He'll play the 5 in some stretches. I'm talking about Cat here. He'll play the 5 in some stretches when you need more offense, you need some scoring. Maybe if you're down by someone, you need some offense. And you'll see him at the 4 when you need some stops, you need more defense. Maybe we'll see Deuce McBride and Mitch together with some of the other starters. Maybe we will be seeing lineups like that. I expect to see that even as a point with that. So bottom line with that, with the starting 5, I want Mitchell Robinson starting. I know the guy has dealing with the health issues and stuff like that, but if he's on this team, I want him starting. I think he's that important to their defensive identity, and I think it matters a little bit to kind of really see what his true value is because, as we've mentioned, he's in a contract year. This kind of stuff does matter for his long-term outlook with the organization, whether or not you can really depend on the guy to be around, to give you good starts, to give you, a good impact for at least 30 minutes in a game. That stuff does matter. So I do want to see him out there frequently, and I think the best way you'll be able to do that is by starting him. Plus, you can't do the hack-a-mitch in the first quarter, right? So, aside from that stuff, though, that's really what I think about that. And as far as some of the other stuff we talked about, with the rest of the roster and some of the stuff that we've talked about with Mike Brown and whatnot, I expect a free-flowing offense. I really do. And I think even if you start Mitchell Robinson, you'll still get that because he gives you the offensive rebounding. He gives you the presence in the paint. You have the screens and stuff that he sets, all that stuff. you're going to have a good offense even with him starting. Maybe you won't have this like super fiery loaded offense with 3-point shooters all over the court like the Boston Celtics do, but that's okay. I feel like sometimes you got to make a sacrifice to make one end better than the other. And if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do, because you don't want to be, a crazy good offense, but one of the worst defenses, because that's pretty much what they were last year. They were a good offense, at least in the first half of the year, but a bad defense. So you want to be able to shore that up, and that's what I think about all that. So that's what I got to say about that.
Luca, may I follow up on one point?
Sure.
I do think it's important that when you're thinking about what this year can be in comparison to last year, that last year was such an anomaly. Tom Thibodeau is such a unique and strange coach, and that he kind of defies what the data is telling you, even though his isms go against the grain. That no starting five played more minutes together than the Knicks last season. So we were a team where sometimes Brunson would play the entire first quarter, or Cat would play the entire first quarter. Whether that was a plus or minus on the stat sheet, it didn't matter. It's just what Tibbs was seeing. He wanted to continue. So I think the substitution pattern will be quicker this season. So even if it's Cat at the 5 or Mitch at the 5, you're going to see variations, maybe even the first 4.5 to 5 minutes of the first quarter, you'll see switching out to where, okay, if OG is really not able to cover his man this time because of a faster foot speed or something, then it's a 3-guard lineup with Deuce McBride going into there, and Mikal Bridges slots down one position. I think you'll see quicker substitution patterns and more adjustments in that first half of the game, instead of leaving a lineup out there that absolutely getting cooked on all fronts, where Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't even know what coverage he's in and just automatically gets in the drop, and that hurts you even more because now we didn't kill in the mid-range. I think you're going to see Mike Brown actually use the personnel based on the matchups each night to night. So it's hard to look at last year and say, this is why we should do it differently this year, because last year, again, was such an anomaly in the way Tom Thibodeau coaches.
Yeah, and I do want to add on that because that is a valid point. Tom Thibodeau, like I said, and I've been saying this for a while, I don't think Tom Thibodeau had a feel for the roster that he had last year, which is, mostly this roster with a couple new additions, of course. I think Mike Brown's a better fit for this roster. A lot of people were, saying like, oh, why would you replace Tom Thibodeau with Mike Brown, who hasn't done much as a head coach, this, that, the other? Well, it's not always about like what their resume says. It's about like how the coach fits with the roster. And I think Mike Brown fits the roster better just because of the offense that he can give you. And as you said, too, the quicker rotations, the quicker substitutions, things like that. Tom Thibodeau was always criticized for not using the bench. Now, granted, the bench was not very good last year, the personnel he did have. But still, he did. We know he didn't really use the bench like that. The starters were getting tired. The fatigue clearly settled in during the postseason. Josh Hart even said it outright. So it's pretty clear that was an issue. I think with Mike Brown, like you said, we will be seeing a lot of different variations, a lot of different lineups. We already kind of saw that during the preseason. Now, I know it's preseason. You don't want to draw a definitive conclusion in that kind of stuff, but we did see him use a lot of different variations of lineups, a lot of different combinations and all that stuff. And I really think that some of those lineups he was using is a good indicator of how he's going to be using his roster this year. Now, obviously, things could change when the regular season starts. Maybe he'll be a little more straight lined. We don't know. We don't know until it'll play out. But I do expect, as Lee said, that it'll be a lot more quicker substitutions. We'll be seeing more different combinations, this, that, the other. And I think that's a good thing for this team. I think that's what they need to do. They need to take advantage of the depth that they do have now.
Absolutely. I want to quickly respond to what's up to Fritz Alcindor Jr. Says Mitch isn't going to do well with big minutes. Why not spread his minutes off the bench? That's what Lee was saying. Have him play off the bench and lessen his minutes a little bit. Obviously, as I said earlier, if you play the 5-out lineup to start, it doesn't diminish you from using Mitch in a double big lineup or spreading his minutes out whatsoever, and then vice versa. And to attack the starting lineup aspects, another reason besides the whole 5-out aspect of terms of offense that I prefer the 5-out just in general, the starting lineup on both sides. Obviously, Lee brought up that Deuce McBride's a better point of attack defender. Also, we looked at this last year. Even XJ, who was on this channel, XJ from Hot Hand Theory and Knicks Film School, now on Locked On Knicks, he's doing great things. He said that Mikal Bridges was the worst screen navigator in the NBA last year, if I'm not mistaken. And the one thing that is apparent as well with, you guys mentioned, the availability of the bench, the quicker rotations. Bridges is not going to have as much mileage this year. Luckily, he's not. Less minutes. He's not going to average as much. Listen, he's. I'm not going to say he's fine playing those minutes. He's average. He has played all of his games that possible, all regular season games, all postseason games. I think it's like he has one more regular season game than the average because he was traded. Obviously, that's the whole different thing. He has the mileage on him. He's a very healthy and durable player, but you don't want to risk it. You don't want to risk it in championship year. God forbid something happens, but putting Deuce at the point of attack, he is a better screen navigator. Obviously, you can let Mikal and OG handle the wings, and maybe OG, could help out Towns. Maybe OG could actually show his versatility a little bit because Lee mentioned in the open his concern was Josh Hart's decline in defense. And Josh Hart was obviously the starter for a long period of time last year where Thibodeau was like, okay, this team's winning games despite what the statistics tell me about the on-off numbers with Josh Hart. I'm going to keep doing this because this team's winning games, not for the sake of the analytics or the on-off numbers. Even in the postseason, like I was debating with a fan, I'm like, dude, they got to replace the starting lineup. Like I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it was Ian Begley, a reporter, they were like, after I think it was game 3 of the Boston series, there were conversations being had from the front office saying, hey, Tibbs, you might have to consider a lineup change. And Tibbs was like, no. Yes, the Knicks would eventually win the Boston series, but it was with other lineups that he experimented with. Not only just in terms of the lineups, but I think the experimentation with different schematics defensively is what can make this Knicks team succeed, because it's not just, okay, we're always going to do drop coverage. We're not always going to ice the screen. We're going to throw in some zone. You saw that in a little bit of preseason where the Knicks were throwing in some zone defense. So it's not going to be as easy for an offense to attack a Karl Anthony Towns or Jalen Brunson. If the Knicks are tight in their rotations, they can communicate well. The zone defense you could throw in every now and then. That's going to be a big factor, not just in terms of lineups, but also experimentation with different schemes. And hopefully, obviously, everybody is versatile enough. And Dylan made the point, and he was absolutely right, which is something I had mentioned earlier in the show. It wasn't so much about, the resume. It was more about, okay, what coach fits with this roster? Because I said at the end of last year, you had a decision to make. You can choose one direction or the other. You can keep Tibbs and remodel the roster to his liking, or you could fire Tibbs and say, let's get a modern coach with a more modern field. Yes, Mike Brown has coached for a while now in the NBA, but at the end of the day, he's got a more modern feel for the game, especially after what he learned in Golden State under Steve Kerr and what he's learned under Popovich. So it's worth noting that it's not always about, the accomplishments. He took the team to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Pacers made the finals, blah, 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 blah. But it was all about the little things. And I think that's what some of the media fails to understand when it comes to the firing of Tom Thibodeau. It wasn't because, Dolan intervened. It wasn't because we lost to the Pacers. It was because of all the little things and the little statistical adjustments. Mike Brown talked about it. He's going to collaborate with this front office. He's going to collaborate with the analytics staff. And he's going to say, and he's also going to collaborate with his own staff. He's going to collaborate with his coaches and say, hey, what you got on this? Inform me about this. Basically last year, Thibodeau just had a bunch of guys. I mean, yes, you had Mark Bryant, Mo Cheeks, they're coming back this year. Rick Brunson's coming back this year. But I really question the role of what actually were they doing, because Tibbs handled the offense. He handled the defense. What else? What was the purpose of the coaching staff? I really wonder. But those were my things on the in terms of the whole media thing. But regardless, Lee brought it up, and I'm just going to bring it up for a quick thing, and then we'll eventually move to storylines, season preview awards, and all that. What's a position of strength with the Knicks? I'm going to start with you, Dylan.
So a position of strength, I think it's pretty much in the front court, as Lee said. We have a lot more depth now, and Cat being their starting power forward, let's just use it for that example, being the starting power forward, and you have Gershon Yabusele and as his backup, who averaged 11 points last year and shot the ball really well. I think you have a good front court right there. And of course, Mitchell Robinson, Trey Jamison, Ariel Hukporti for center depth right there. That's good front court depth. And you also have Mohamed Diawara, who I did forget to mention right there, and Pacome Dadier still in the wings as well. I don't expect those last two to play a whole bunch. I don't expect Jamison to play really either, but either or, it's good depth to have in case injuries arise or certain guys are unavailable and this, that, the other. And I do think that they improved the backcourt depth a little bit. I know it's not amazing, and I know they're kind of missing a secondary ball handler behind Brunson now that Brogdon retired. But either way, I feel like you still have a little bit better depth back there now than you did last year, because you still have, obviously Brunson, then you have Deuce McBride, Jordan Clarkson now, Landry Shamit's back here as well. Tyler Kolek could grow and end up being something decent. Hopefully, fingers crossed on that, because I've been pretty high on Kolek, so I'm hoping that he can be a solid backup point guard. And with all that being said, I do think they have just a lot better a better roster now entirely. I think an area that they're a little weak in is the wing still, just because you kind of have pretty much OG and Hart as your wing depth, and then after that it kind of gets a little grainy because you don't really know what Pacome Dadier could be. You don't really know what Diawara or guys like that could end up being. They're very much raw prospects still, so I feel like their wing depth is still just a little bit kind of like weaker, but at the same time, I think you have a lot of good strengths in the other areas that I just mentioned, to where it's okay. You can only fit 15 guys on a roster. You can't make all 15 guys this absolutely perfect roster. It's just not possible this day and age with the whole second apron and all that stuff. So I think with the roster they have now, given those circumstances, they're in good shape. I do think they're in much better shape now to absorb any sort of injuries or any losses now than they were last year. Like last year, when Brunson went down, I was very concerned. I mean, you had people going on TV saying they could lose every game when Brunson went down. Now, if the same situation happened now, I don't think people would be saying that. I think we're in much better shape now to absorb some sort of, any sort of losses that may come about. Now, obviously, you don't want to lose your best player to long-term injuries. Like, we don't want to see Brunson miss a month again, or we don't want to see Towns deal with a long-term injury. No, you need those guys. You need them to be playing as much as possible. But at the same time, if something like that happens, I do trust the new guys that have been brought in, the new reinforcements, to step it up. I do trust them. So I feel a lot better about the roster now than I did last year, and that's pretty much really all I got to say about the roster.
Lee, if you have anything to add on to Dylan's point, or possibly your other point, which you made early on, lack of concern, or I should say the more so concerns with the playmaking. If you have anything else to add on before I get into my point, with the potential strengths and weaknesses of the roster.
I think our strongest position is shooting guard. I would put us, OKC, Memphis, probably top 3 in shooting guard depth. And I like the versatility of ours for that number 1 spot. I tend to be very optimistic when it comes to our Knicks. But I like the depth. We had a real hard time for someone to have to come off the bench and be a pressure valve release for us offensively. And Jordan Clarkson is one of the best. Jordan Clarkson's game is very similar to J.R. Smith, someone who made me pull my hair out when I watched him with the Knicks tape team. But he can hit a shot in crunch time. He's a playoff riser, always was, with the Utah Jazz. And they finished close games a lot, 3-guard lineups with him, Donovan Mitchell, and Mike Conley during that stretch. So I think we showed some preseason where in that 3-guard lineup, he was fairly successful, even on switches, navigating ball screens. So I like him as an offensive option. I'm a huge fan of Deuce McBride. He's become a movement shooter, maybe our best or second best shooter last year. Even on a down year, I thought his movement shooting was really impressive. He shot 51% on catch-and-shoot opportunities, which is something no one should forget when discussing his shooting ability. And then on ball, it's a hawk. If Mikal Bridges is the worst screen navigator on the team, I think he's the best. And it don't matter who you put on him, unless he's a white point guard, he's probably going to lock him down. He's, for some reason, has a lot of difficulty when it comes to Caucasian point guards. He's gotten cooked in years past, multiple playoff series by some of his arch nemesis. And then you have Mikal Bridges, who can play some 2, and Josh Hart, who can play some 2 as well. And I think having that front court depth that Dylan spoke to will allow Josh Hart to play at least half his minutes at the 2, and then split between the 3-4. Otherwise, with Yabusele did some of that burn. I think Diawara will play spot minutes in the forward position at the 11th man when you need it. But I like Josh Hart at the 2. That's where some of the defense issues might not be such of a concern. And some of the 3-point shooting might not be a concern, but he'll always be surrounded by even better shooters than him and better defenders than him if he's a 2 opposed to playing the 4, which of all the mistakes Tom Thibodeau made, that was one of the most egregious, in my opinion, was constantly sliding him at the 4. And you can make the same argument, pressure Chu at the 5. And Karl-Anthony Towns for the 5 very long stretches without a substitution. Those things, I think, killed us in that Indiana series. But I love it, man. I think we got a lot of dogs at that 2-guard spot, and I like that if Brunson sits, we have someone else who can get a shot probably against 85% of the NBA in Jordan Clarkson. That's really special. And the 2-guard spot is one of the most crucial ones in the modern NBA. And we got someone that can fit almost any offensive set that Mike Brown wants to run.
Yeah, I think the flaws of, as you mentioned, Lee, that Jordan Clarkson's a very similar player to J.R. Smith. And the thing is with Clarkson, more so in the last 2 years, obviously a former six-man of the year with the Utah Jazz, but you know what? He was playing his best when he had talent around him. You look at the last 2 years, the Utah Jazz haven't been good. Who do they really have off the bench that really scares you? Now you got the Knicks. You possibly have Josh Hart. Again, depends on various lineups. Deuce McBride, Yabu Sele as a stretch 4, stretch 5, wherever you want to put him. Probably better at the 4. But Clarkson, to me, as you said, he's a playoff riser. He can create his own shot. He can create for others on a secondary basis. But I'll tell you what, this isn't just a system where it's like, okay, we're just going to let Jordan Clarkson go to work here and just live with whatever shot he decides to take. Like Campaign last year. I know Dylan wanted to bawl his eyes out every time he watched Campaign. And a quote from Dylan, every shot Campaign takes was the right shot, or he believes was the right shot. I remember when Dylan said that on the telecast. I think it was either game 1 or game 5, but that's regardless about Campaign.
Campaign never believed in a bad shot.
He never believed in a bad shot. I think I remember one of the shots in the postseason that like it went over the hoop or something. I don't know. But
you just say the same thing about Jordan Clarkson. He just takes better shots. Yeah. He's a better player.
Yeah,
he does. No. He does.
Yeah, the Jordan Clarkson experience.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing with Clarkson, and I'll be honest, like at the time, he was in the midst of buyout with the Jazz, and then he said, "Oh, he's coming to the Knicks," and I was like, I'll accept this if it's a veterans minimum, but I think the Knicks, I think, was like rumored that they were going to originally use the TPE, the taxpayer level exception. They didn't. And I got to say, for Clarkson, yes, he has his flaws, which is the defense and which is also the shot selection at times, which he's a real six-man. He's a real microwave scorer. I think it's a steal if you get solid production. Not saying he has to be sixth man of the year. He can be a candidate possibly with the better players around him and a system that benefits him. I think he's going to be a real good player, especially, once again, the Knicks signed him for the veteran minimum, which was great. Love just the basis of that for Clarkson. It makes me the great hire. Once again, going back to the individual system, we brought up Josh Hart can play make, Bridges can play make. Kolek can play make. You have your very much secondary playmakers. Yes, Brunson is going to be the primary playmaker, but off the bench or just as Lee mentioned, the multiple guard lineups. This system, once again, I apologize if I'm repeating myself. You have a free-flowing offense that is going to allow multiple ball handlers with the ball in their hands. This is not like, okay, one guy has the ball in their hands, so you got to look out for this guy. No, you got to look out for this guy, and this guy. Multiple. That's what I love about the system. And Lee's right. The shooting guard depth, I think, is really good. I'm obviously intrigued with, I know Dylan mentioned the wing depth in terms of the small forwards like OG and Hart and what becomes a Dottier and potentially Diawara. He also showed some playmaking ability, some raw playmaking ability in the preseason. Yes, guaranteed he's probably not going to get a rotation spot at least, but you might have a potential rotation player for years to come. Yes, he's on a 1-year contract, which they signed to him today. But it's very interesting. I think the Knicks have lined out their depth very nicely. Again, the one concern that I would have is probably just the point guard depth. But once again, this is a system where it allows for multiple ball handlers. So that's why I got to say, in terms of the front court depth, it's phenomenal. You have Towns, you have Robinson, you have Yabusele. You can play the 4, sometimes the 5. It depends on what matchup you want. Porty, I think, if he's in the rotation, my personal opinion, if the Knicks decide to go with a double big lineup, I think he could take a step up this year. Jameson looked solid in the preseason defensively, but as I said, the overall depth is great when it comes to the guards and the front court. Point guard's really the only concern. But with that being said, I'm going to get into this key storylines real quick. And there's not really much. There's a lot of excitement, but there's a lot of pressure on this team. Does anybody want to start off on the Giannis headline? I know it's been a few weeks, but
I'll touch on the Giannis headline because it was all we heard pretty much all summer. Giannis this, Giannis that, and then come to find out right at the beginning of training camp that Giannis apparently did want to come here. Now, I will say, I mean, it's pretty amazing just like how far we've really come. Just as little as like 6 to 8 years ago, nobody ever wanted to come here. Nobody. I mean, it was frowned upon to sign with the Knicks. That's one of the reasons I always commended Julius Randle, because he signed with the Knicks at a time when nobody ever wanted to, and when it was frowned upon to do it. He came here. He ended up becoming an all-star, all NBA level player, turning around the franchise, this, that, the other, right? He set the foundation for what we have now. And if it wasn't for him, we don't have Jalen Brunson. We don't have Karl-Anthony Towns. We don't have OG Anunoby. They don't make win-now moves like that if it wasn't for someone like that. Now, as far as the Giannis stuff goes, I don't want to get too off base with it. I don't expect the Knicks to make a move for Giannis during the season. I felt like it was going to either be this offseason or it'll be next summer. And what I'm expecting at this point now that it's clear the interest is there, the Knicks are going to ride with this roster this year. They're going to see how far they can go. They're going to see if they can win a title, because I still think this roster is good enough to win a title. And if they don't win the title, the next summer is when they're going to go all in on Giannis. And that's what I really expect. And I know they extended Bridges at the point in the summer this year where he could still be eligible to be traded once around the trade deadline, like before the trade deadline, because I know he can't get traded until February, but it's before the trade deadline. So in theory, they could throw him in like as a chip in a big deal. But in a situation like this, when you're looking at Giannis here, the only way I expect him to get moved during the season is if the Bucks are just a complete disaster. If the Bucks are several games under 500, well out of the playoff race type stuff, they're just all over the place, or Giannis outright requests to get traded, that's when I would maybe see a midseason trade. But when you're trading for a superstar like him, it's going to take more than just a Knicks-Bucks interaction. They're going to end up needing a third team to supply more ammo and to really give more assets in a deal, because the Knicks don't have enough. They have players. They have, theoretically you could trade like Towns or Anunoby and Bridges, this, that, the other. But the Bucks are also going to value draft picks. They don't even own the control of their own pick for years from now. So they're going to value that. They're going to want draft picks. The Knicks don't exactly have draft picks because, we gave up a lot of them to get Bridges, right? Mm-hmm. Which, whether or not that deal worked out, I mean, yes, it's a good trade. I still would do it, but at the same time, we're still trying to figure out if that's really like the championship pushing move. I guess we'll really find out this year if that makes a big difference or not. But that's besides the point. When you're looking at something like Giannis, at first, the whole Giannis to the Knicks stuff, I always thought was just smoke and mirrors. I didn't really think it was much because, New York's a big market. They're going to always rumor big players to New York. Look at 2019, for example, when everyone thought we were getting Kyrie, KD, and drafting Zion Williamson, and we didn't end up with a single one of those players. So you can't really predict anything like that. But, as far as Giannis goes in this situation, it's clear that he does want to come here. So knowing what the Knicks have done in recent years, I feel like they can make it happen. But I don't know when that would happen. Because, I mean, we saw Bridges essentially force his way to New York. Josh Hart, when he got moved, he embraced New York right away. The guys do want to come here. These star players actually want to play in New York, which is, like I said before, it's pretty surreal how far we've come, because just years ago, nobody wanted to come here. Now it seems like everyone wants to come here. So they're clearly building something great, and that's a great sign to see. Now, do I want them to trade the entire farm for Giannis? I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to blow it up just for Giannis. Don't get me wrong, it's Giannis. I would love him in New York. He's, an amazing player, this, that, the other. I don't really need to go into detail just because we all know about him. But at the same time, it would be such a risky move if you blow it all up. You know what I mean? Which is why I expect that if they're going to do it, it would be next summer. They'll push all their chips for him if they determine that this roster right here is not good enough to win a title. But I think this roster is good enough. But obviously, months down the road, that could be a different situation. So that's what I got to say about the Giannis stuff.
Lee, any input?
I like that Dylan was very objective. He didn't give his opinion till the very end, and even on that, he was kind of ambiguous. Those are the type of Giannis conversations that I definitely respect, because at the end of the day, us as fans, our opinion on whether we want someone or don't want someone is absolutely meaningless. We don't know what's going on in Leon Rose's mind. We have so many people on Twitter that pretend to be reporters, working for pretend publications with pretend sources, and they act like that everything is guaranteed. But I do think there are tea leaves we can look at with the Giannis situation. He turns 31 in December. I'm sure all of us would agree that Milwaukee is absolutely not contending for a championship this season when Giannis is a first, second, and third option. I mean, even the options to the options, or Kyle Kuzma or Cole Anthony, those are like fifth options, sixth options on a championship level team. So after Middleton was traded and Dame was a wash and Drew was let go for Dame, they don't really have any star power, anyone on that roster, I would contend, with a ceiling. Everyone has a floor, but no one has a ceiling, including Miles Turner, their new addition. So I think he is going to be out, agree with Dylan, next summer. I think he's smart. He's very strategic. I think he wanted to see if the Knicks were interested. Conversations were confirmed to be had in August, multiple conversations with a deal that Milwaukee felt was insufficient at the time. But for the Knicks end of things, they had to see, okay, what works and what doesn't. What pieces were they interested in? What pieces were they not interested in? Who will have to be circumvented to a third team for draft capital, as Dylan said, that then pushes a better deal on the table? How many other teams? Is it 4 teams? Because of this third team that has that piece might be in a certain salary cap position. We have to work with additional one to make it work as we did in the Brooklyn deal, bringing in Charlotte. But all that being said, tea leaves as they are, I think whether we win the championship or we don't win the championship, I think the Knicks are going to trade for Giannis this summer. No matter what happens this season, I think it feels very inevitable. There have been other timelines like this. The Lakers with Anthony Davis is a good example where it's like this person just wants to be there, and eventually it's going to happen, and eventually it does. I've been watching the NBA long enough to say that this feels like Giannis has one team on his mind, and the CBA has very limited to 1, maybe 2 options where you have to give up almost a major, substantial amount of your cap and your roster to bring a player in. The Knicks are one of the few that would have some depth left over. Most importantly, Jalen Brunson, that can help Giannis win a championship. And I think he understands the importance of a point guard to his game because he won with one of the all-time greats in Drew Holiday. So I do think it is inevitable. That is a target. That's probably the only target I think that Leon Rose realistically would completely destroy the roster in order to get. Whether I'm for it or against it, again, it does not matter. I happen to think, though, I Thanos, it's inevitable.
Yeah, because obviously it hasn't happened yet, but Lee believes it's inevitable. And here's the thing, people were discussing it. It was actually legit rumors, as Dylan mentioned. I gotta agree with Dylan. I think the Knicks can win a championship with Giannis. I think they can win a championship without Giannis. Obviously, the rumors came to fruition. Jonathan Macri made an interesting point. I think he said something along the lines. He wasn't like, "Oh my God, go get Giannis," but he was like, essentially that, the risk of not trading for Giannis, and obviously it depends. You have to trade for him at the right time. You can't just trade him for any time, either the deadline or the next offseason. You're potentially letting Giannis, and Lee mentioned the only team that that Giannis has been linked to is the Knicks. There's no other team right now. I know I'm not sure if anybody in Brooklyn wants him or anything like that. There's no other team right now. So the one risk that you have is he could potentially go to another team and you could possibly be facing that team in the finals. But obviously that is way far into the future. And B is obviously giving up a lot of your cap because the way the CBA is circumvented now and how everything is put into place. But my stance is this. Giannis is obviously one of the greatest all-time players. We all know that. And one of the top 3 players in the NBA right now. And I saw somebody mention that, oh, well, it wasn't so much a homer criticism. It's an interesting point, but obviously the Knicks are trying to contend now. And the person was like, well, Giannis's game is not going to age too long because of, explosiveness, because you obviously lose explosiveness once you get on the other side of 30, which as Lee mentioned, he's going to be 31 in December. So obviously that's the thing to look for. But as long as you have like good pieces around Giannis, and obviously this is years into the future or months into the future, you can contend for a championship. Because as Lee said, I'm going to bring it up again. What is the roster in what does the roster look like in Milwaukee? It's not great. I know a good friend of mine is a huge Bucks fan. He obviously brought in Miles Turner. That's great. Kyle Kuzma, he's probably better off the bench. Gary Trent Jr. brought back, I don't know if it was a 1-year deal, but he's a good shooter. But yeah, it was a 1-year deal. Taurean Prince, he's solid, but he's off the bench. 1 year. Just a lot of minimum guys. Cole Anthony was recently picked up. Their backup center guys is Jericho Sims. I mean, come on now. And Bobby Portis is also a former Knick who's on that team. He's more of a 6-man, but it just doesn't look like an overall great roster. Giannis has been saying, and it goes back to so many things, whether it was the firing of Budenholzer, he hired Griffin, wanted Griffin, and they fired Griffin because of Giannis. And now Giannis apparently likes Doc Rivers, but they're not winning because of the roster they have in front of him. Now he has his 2 brothers on the roster. Regardless, all these different things. I would trade for Giannis if the right package is available. Obviously, you have to include a 3rd or 4th team, but that's years into the future. We need to see what this roster is right now. You can't jump to any conclusions at the deadline because it's about what this team looks like in April, in May, and in June. But with that being said, I want to get to some season preview awards, preseason awards, not necessarily like preseason, but before the season awards. So I'm going to start out with this breakout player of the year. Now, this doesn't have to be a rookie. This can be a player who, I should say, it's not a line in the same depth. Breakout player or most improved. I'm going to start with Lee.
Across the entire NBA?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to say for the Knicks.
Okay. Mikal Bridges, I think, is going to look the best of everyone that was here last year. I think his efficiency goes up. His defensive responsibilities go down. I think he's on ball more. There's just going to be a sheer higher number of highlight reels that involve Mikal Bridges on ball, whether in isolation or in give and go, dribble handoffs, cutting to the rim, driving to the rim, and into the free throw line more. I think we see an uptick in free throw attempts, an uptick in free throw percentage, and an uptick in driving to the hoop, instead of just settling for that fadeaway jumper or taking threes in the corner. So I think he looks the best now in preseason. And I think in the regular season, he's going to be the one that by the end of this year, everyone is going to say that trade was worth it. That's my probably biggest and boldest prediction around Mikal Bridges.
Dylan?
I do agree with everything you said about Bridges because I have been saying that I do think he will thrive under Mike Brown. But my choice for this one specifically, I'm going to say Deuce McBride. I think Deuce McBride looked very fluid in the preseason. I think he looked very comfortable. I think he's just going to continue to grow as a player. He's still pretty young. He's still growing. I think he's going to have a great year. I think he will contend for the Sixth Man of the Year award even. Who knows? Maybe if as the season goes on, we see him start. Who knows about that? So I honestly think that he'll be the, breakout player for this team. I expect a big season from Deuce McBride. We see his numbers go up each year and this, that, the other, and sometimes he kind of looks up and down, but I think under Mike Brown, he's going to look a lot more comfortable. The offense is going to be a lot faster. It fits his play style better. I'm going to go with Deuce McBride for this one.
For the breakout player, I'm actually going to say, I'm going to throw out this name. You guys mentioned great points as well with your awards nominations. I think if the Knicks, which in my opinion they will, if they go double big, I think Ariel Huckporty is just going to come out of nowhere and have a good year. I think he's going to get better defensively. I think maybe he gets better setting screens because obviously this is a very free-flowing movement offense. But also the mid-range shot, I think he's going to grow and get better on. We obviously saw last year and a little bit in the preseason. He has a little bit of offensive game. But overall, I think it's Huckporty. But if you want somebody who is the most improved, I got to say it's Mikal Bridges. I think Mikal Bridges is going to play phenomenal in this system. Obviously, it depends. People will always measure it up against the 6 first-round, 5, 6 first-round picks that the Knicks traded. But if he's that final piece and he's hitting his three, listen, even with the free-flowing offense, the better defensive system, and the better utilization of lineups, has to be a better screen navigator, has to be better an on-ball defender at times. He also has to be a better overall three-point shooter. And it's going to be, let's be fair, it's going to be the second year with his new form, I guess you would call it. So I would say Mikal Bridges. Let's go with most disappointing. Who do you think will underachieve? And I don't mean that in like a negative sense, but not in the aspect like, oh, we're going to have to trade him at this offseason, but anybody that you think might possibly underperform. I'm going to start with Dylan now.
This one's tough because I do think a lot of the guys on the team are going to perform well. But if you wanted me to pick one player for this instance, I'm going to go with Gershon Yabusele. And the only reason I say that is because I feel like he's going to have a hard time adjusting to the system. And, during the preseason, it looked like he was having a hard time a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's a bad signing because I very much am in favor of the signing. And as I said before, I do expect pretty much everybody to perform well. But for the sake of picking a player, I'm going to say Yabusele is going to underperform just a little bit, just because I'm not sure what his role is going to look like exactly. I feel like he's got one of the more undefined roles on the team. And I don't know. I'm a little concerned about how he will, fit in this system, I guess. I don't think he's going to have like an awful season, no. But I do think he won't replicate the 11 points that he put up last year and the excellent shooting. I expect those numbers to take a down trickle a little bit. I do expect him to be impactful. I just don't know exactly what his role will look like. So that's the main reason I'm going to go with him, just because it's so undefined with him.
Very intriguing perspective. I'll go to Lee next.
Josh Hart, for the reason that I said, the decline in defense. And I think that Mike Brown has seen during this preseason with Josh Hart's injury that the Knicks can be really, really good without him. So when he comes back, how is he used? He was kind of a nexus point for our offense under Tom Thibodeau. He was that secondary and tertiary creator. His advanced passing and outlet passing got us in transition. He was a one-man transition himself. He's one of our best finishers around the basket, probably our second best foul drawer after Jalen Brunson on the team. He did so many things for us. Offensive rebounds. We were able to start only one true big with Cap because Josh Hart in the starting lineup gave us that offensive and defensive rebounding at the 3 position. But I think in this current lineup with him on the bench, he's going to struggle with the reduced spacing that that bench unit has. Jordan Clarkson, not a pure shooter, a streaky shooter. Yabusele, same thing. Mitchell Robinson, not a shooter. You really only have, if the starting lineup has Mitchell Robinson indeed, you really only have Deuce McBride as the only movement shooter in the rotation. Is Landry Shamet in the rotation? I don't think that's been clarified yet. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. And if he is, that would certainly help Josh Hart in terms of spacing. But right now, Hart, and I don't expect 5 in, 5 out like sometimes Tom Thibodeau did in terms of substitution patterns. But I think there will be times when he's out there with limited spacing and his three-point shot is going to have to be on in order for him to be effective offensively if he's not in transition as a one-man rocket. But the defense to me is very worrying because he's always been a struggling transition defender. But if you put him in any type of situation now where he's starting pick and roll, or if Mike Brown decides to switch more than Tom Thibodeau, he's going to get cooked by either being too small, too slow, or too flat-footed. I'm not sure what his role is on defense, the same way that Dylan's not sure what Yabusele's role is on offense. I think it could be troubling. It's why I think in order to pay Mitch and Deuce McBride eventually, Hart is the one that must go.
Interesting perspective. What's up to Darius 4345? Salute, big up Lee. I may be crazy, but I say Cat for most disappointing player. Definitely interesting perspective, and I could see that realistically.
I hope not.
I hope not either. I'm knock on wood. Hope not. I think he's going to have a big year, hopefully in the offensive system. But regardless, I'm going to go with Lee here. I'm going to say it's going to be Josh Hart. Obviously with the injury, the stent on his hand or whatever, I think players are going to attack him a little more on the side which he has the bandage wrapped up. I think that's going to be the case, and I don't think he's going to be nearly as relied upon in this Mike Brown system as Tom Thibodeau, because Josh Hart was Tom Thibodeau's baby essentially. Starting lineup, big minutes. So many various roles, whether it's secondary playmaker, defense, all these different things. I don't think he's going to have as much big as a role as Lee said. There's a possibility that could be the odd man out. Maybe he doesn't like the system. Maybe he's not a fan of Mike Brown. I'm not trying to draw up theories and all that, but I really think there's a possibility that Josh Hart steps back to the mean a little bit this year. Doesn't mean we'll see less hustle. That's a great thing about Josh Hart. You know, as Lee said, he's a very much a high IQ player. He does tend to make dumb plays every now and then, but he's a high IQ player. He's a very high effort player. And I think the Knicks and every team could use a Josh Hart one another. But moving away from the disappointing player, this could be a big, this could be a wing, this could be a guard. Defensive MVP, I'll start with Lee.
OG Anunoby, I think if used properly, especially getting some time at the 3, if we do indeed play a double bid lineup, if he plays the same number of games that he played last year, which I believe he was at the threshold to win Defensive Player of the Year, I think he'll be a top 5 candidate for that award comes award season time. He's going to be so necessary for Mike Brown's system, and Mike Brown has always coveted wings. And the murmurs I heard from fellow media members is that OG Anunoby was one of the most appealing things to Mike Brown about taking this head coaching job, was having him on both ends of the floor, but specifically defensively guarding the bigger wings, which every contender right now, both the East and the West, their offense, with the exception of maybe Denver and OKC, is run through an unbelievable two-way player on the perimeter. So you need an OG Anunoby to lock all those guys up. And the thing about OG, he can also guard SGA. He can also front Nikola Jokic and disrupt his ability as an offensive hub. So to me, he is a nexus point for us defensively. And I think he might not see an uptick in usage offensively, but I think he'll get more options as a trailer for catch and shoot or pull up threes in transition. I think he'll get more opportunities as just the spray and the read and react system that Mike Brown is really going to emphasize with 1 or 2 or 3 shell offensive sets within that system to be more intuitive. He's going to generate more opportunities at the rim, more opportunities to catch and shoot, and more opportunities just to attack in his special mid-range area inside the arc.
Dylan?
Yeah, I think OG Anunoby is the easy answer, but to avoid repeating everything Lee just said, I'm going to give a different perspective. I think Mikal Bridges could go for this one. And the reason I say that is because, we saw him improve defensively as the year went on last year, but now I think he feels better here. I feel like Tom Thibodeau just wasn't the coach for him, and I think when you're not really feeling the coach out as a player, you're not going to be as motivated to be as strong on that end of the floor. Now that I feel like he's more in a groove and he feels more comfortable with Mike Brown, that's going to motivate him to be much better defensively, and he's going to be that way for pretty much most of the year. And we've seen Mikal Bridges at his peak defensively be very, very good. He has a first-team all-defense selection in his career, so this is a guy who has the resume for that end already. I expect Mikal Bridges to be right back in that conversation again. Do I think he'll be, defensive player of the year? Probably not. They never give it to wings at this point. But I do think that he'll be, in the conversation as one of the best perimeter defenders once again. I think he will be right back in that conversation just because I think he'll be a lot more happy. He'll be a lot more fluid. He'll be a lot more comfortable in the situation he's in now. And it'll make him play better defensively. We've seen him be very strong in point of attack, and we've also seen him be very helpful and be helpful in the help defense. We saw the plays against Boston last year, as we all know. I think that right there is like the type of Mikal Bridges that we'll be seeing a lot more of this season. I feel like the playoffs motivated him a little bit to be better defensively, and I think if he can carry that over to this season with the new system in Mike Brown, he's going to be up there as a defensive MVP for the team specifically. Like I said, OG Anunoby is the easy answer because we all know how great he is defensively, and I do want to say OG Anunoby, but I also want to give a different perspective because, I'm pretty sure we all agree that OG Anunoby is ridiculous defensively, but we can't just pretend like Mikal Bridges is a bad defender too. When he is playing at his best pace, he's an elite defender too. So he's got to get his flowers in that regard, and that's why I'm going to talk about him for that case.
And Dylan, if you're right and Mitchell Robinson starts and he meets the health threshold, he absolutely could be a candidate for that award as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, Mitchell, luckily we got a lot of candidates, but I'm going to actually agree with Lee and say OG Anunoby. I think with the right utilization and Lee said it perfectly, him with being at the 3, likely in a double big lineup or whatever, the experimentation that Mike Brown, that he has the ability to have as rather than just sticking to one system, as I mentioned a few times in this live stream, I think OG in a variance of defensive systems, whether running zone, whether they're running drop or whatever, I think his versatility will truly be unlocked. Where Mike Brown is going to work hard as hell to hide whatever defensive weakness, he's going to use OG Anunoby. And Lee, as you mentioned, when it came to OG Anunoby being a high point for Mike Brown taking this job, I think it's both defense and offense. And I know you brought up the offensive perspective, and I'll take it right to that. I think OG running in transition is going to be phenomenal. Yes, he's a big body guy a little bit, but he and Bridges are definitely going to succeed just in terms of the overall offensive aspect when asked to play transition defense. Not just transition offense, but transition defense, getting back on the floor, but a very fast-paced system. So my answer would be OG Anunoby, but moving away from the player season preview awards, I think we know who the offensive MVP is. If anybody wants to offer a different take, I think the obvious would be Jalen Brunson, but we're going to stamp this one. This is last 3 before we finally end off. We're going to do record predictions, ceiling, and floor. So I know you guys mentioned it. We're just going to officially stamp this on. Lee and Dylan, full on thread, record prediction, ceiling for this team, floor of this team, and maybe your expectation too.
I'll go first for this one. So I think the record prediction, as I said back in the opening, and I'll bring it up more in depth here, I expect the team to win at least 55 games, but I'll pull out a flat number and say they're going to win 57. I think they'll go 57-25. I firmly believe that they're going to be the top seed in the Eastern Conference. I do think that they are better than the Cleveland Cavaliers, but I can see a scenario where the Cleveland Cavaliers finish above them. But I don't think the seeding 1 or 2 is the most important thing. We know they're going to be in that conversation. Obviously, we want to see how they do in the postseason and make sure you get the home court advantage and all that stuff. But as far as records go and stuff like that, they're gonna be one of the best teams in the NBA. Fully expect that, and I expect them to be, cruise through the regular season essentially. Kind of, get your wins, take care of business, really get through these guys, and then when the postseason comes around, turn it up a notch. I'm not saying that they have to take it easy during the regular season. No, of course not. I want them to play at their best level and really develop continuity and chemistry and all that stuff and understand Brown's system. But at the same time, we know this team's very good. So make sure that just ensure that you're in the playoffs in a good seed, you're a top seed, you get the home court advantage, and then kick it up in the playoffs. They don't have to be the 1 seed to make a run to the finals. They don't have to. I would love for them to be the 1 seed, but they don't have to be. They don't. And also for other things I expect out of this team, like I said before, I think they're going to be the number 1 offense. I boldly have predicted that a lot of times throughout this summer, and I'm going to say it again right here right before the season begins. They're going to be the number 1 offense. I know during the preseason they kind of looked up and down on that end of the floor, but when this team starts clicking, which they eventually will, they're going to be very, very tough to stop on offense. So there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to have a lot of trouble guarding Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns in pick and roll, and guarding Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. There's going to be teams that are going to have a really hard time with that. And we saw last year that they have so many. Last year they had a lot of guys that could just go off any given night, and I fully expect that to happen again this year. Now that the offensive system is much more advanced and more modern, I think we could see a lot of big performances from several different guys. You know what I mean? And I'm expecting Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns to be all-stars once again. I think Jalen Brunson will even be top 5 in the MVP conversation. Do I think he'll win MVP? No. Just because, I just don't see him averaging 35 a game. If he manages to do that, then maybe he'll win MVP. But if he doesn't do that, which I don't expect him to do, then he'll be in the conversation. But I do expect the assist numbers to trickle up for both Brunson and Towns because the ball movement is going to be much more profound because that's one of the things that Mike Brown has really emphasized in his coaching. And I think we're just going to see a very, very balanced offense. Now, I know the defense might not be the best in the world because your 2 best players are not good defenders, but that's okay. I think they have a lot more defensive talent now surrounded around them to where they can kind of absorb that a little bit. And as long as the personnel is used right, the schemes are done correctly, they're going to be a good defensive team. They might not be the number 1 defense, but if you're top 10 in defense, then you're pretty sold right there. You're pretty solid. So that's what I got to say about that. That's what I think that their predictions will be. Now, as far as do I think they'll win a championship this year? I so badly want to say they will, but I'm hesitant just because the NBA is weird sometimes. I don't know if they're ever going to, I don't know if they're going to win the finals, but I've boldly predicted this a couple times on the Fireside Knicks page, so I'll say it on here for those who haven't seen that. But I think the finals is going to end up being the Knicks versus the Timberwolves. And the reason I say the Timberwolves, I think Anthony Edwards takes a big leap, and I think he's going to get them to the NBA Finals finally after getting them to the Western Conference Finals the past couple of years. So that's what I'm going to say. Those are my predictions. I'm going to hold off on saying if they're going to win a title just yet because I want to see how it plays out on the court. But I do expect them to make the finals. If they do anything less than make the finals, it's a failure. You got to take the next step. You got to keep moving forward. So
absolutely, that's why you hired the coach to innovate and improve with these players. But Lee, your predictions. I know you mentioned them earlier, but we're officially going to stamp them down and stamp down the predictions.
Win total 58, ceiling championship, which I think they're going to win, and floor. And this is ostensibly because of the injuries to Boston and the Pacers. The floor is the finals, in my opinion. I think there's no one in the East that scares me because all the other teams have severe compromised elements to their roster where I don't think Cleveland's a real contender until Evan Mobley becomes the best player. I don't think Atlanta Hawks have a true number 1 option. Jalen Johnson, I don't think can be that. And Trae Young is not that. And then Orlando shooting. They added one of the best, Desmond Bane, solid movement shooter, but you need more than that. When your 2 best players both shoot under 30% on high volume, you can't be a championship contender based on not just my opinion, but based on NBA history. So I think the floor is the finals, and I think they beat the Denver Nuggets, who to me had the best offseason, and finally getting Joker a solid backup in Valanciunas. But I love them bringing back Bruce Brown and upgrading from Michael Porter Jr. to Cam Johnson was unbelievable. I mean, Tim Hardaway Jr. is just that's a throw-in. Whether he hits or not is as hard to predict as it is effective. But I think the addition of Bruce Brown back on that roster and Cam Cam Johnson supplanting Michael Porter Jr. That'll be in the finals. And I think we match up very well against Denver. They were one of the good teams we were actually able to beat and have a winning record against last season. And Karl-Anthony Towns, while with Minnesota, showed he can guard Joker on an island. So we don't need him to do that again, along with Mitchell Robinson.
Great stuff. And as a lot of people like even mentioned, this was surrounding the whole Mike Malone firing. People mentioned that the bench was bad, but obviously you mentioned, Lee, that the Nuggets added Tim Hardaway Jr. That brought back Bruce Brown, Cam Johnson addition. But in terms of my predictions, I have the Knicks winning 56 games. I was essentially right along the threshold as much as you guys. I think that's their record prediction in terms of my opinion. Ceiling, I think it's a finals win. Personally, the Knicks going down the Canyon of Heroes in New York City. But in terms of floor, I think it's a trip to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, I will say, in accordance with Lee's point, outside of maybe the Cavs, I don't think there's a team that really scares me because, once again, Pacers have injuries with Tyrese Halliburton. You have the Boston Celtics with Jason Tatum's injury, and they lost pieces like Porzingis and Drew Holiday. Yes, they added Anthony Simons, but he's nowhere near the distributor, and I think he's more of a weak point defensively. Detroit, yes, they added Duncan Robinson, but I think they're going to stay top 6. Atlanta Hawks, they have a lot of depth. I like the addition of Porzingis and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I don't think, in my opinion, they have like that true superstar that can take them over the top. Yes, Trae Young is going to be mentioned. Oh, he's a superstar. Listen, he's a really good we all know what he is offensively. Defensively, he's one of the worst. But at the end of the day, that's a very level roster, but I don't think that's enough to take him over the top to, let's say, a team like the Cavs, a team like the Knicks. So my personal opinion, Eastern Conference Finals appearance is the floor for the Knicks. And I'd be, as according to Dylan, a finals appearance or even a finals win would be the expectation. Anything below that is a disappointment for me. But we're going to start to wrap it up here on the Knickscast channel. I'll just get a few comments real quick. Josh will be Josh. Deuce could take that next step and surprise. Agree. I'll start with Lee, Dylan, and myself for final thoughts.
Really excited for this upcoming season. As a fan who started watching in 2002, I was telling him before the show, Luca before the show, that I'm not really a sports guy. My interest, as my name is, I love poetry, I love theater, I love painting, contemporary art, performance art. I'm not really into sports, and basketball is the only sport I watch, but I'm in it. I help coach AAU teams. I go to the high school state championships here in Texas every year and have since 2003. I fell in love with basketball in 2000 and decided to be a Knicks fan in 2002 because my father is from Long Island, and I wanted to have somebody to connect with him over. He's not really into the arts like I am, but he loves hoops. So I decided to be a Knicks fan, and it has been the first 20 years absolute hell. I questioned myself on whether I made the right decision year over year, especially during that Isaiah Thomas era, and then again in the Phil Jackson era. And now here we are, the North Star of the NBA with an absolute, to me, championship player in Jalen Brunson and an unbelievable offensive 3-level talent in Karl-Anthony Towns. So I'm really excited. Usually I get really hype over rewatching The Sopranos or seeing a new painting by one of my friends. Now I'm really hype about the Knicks, and that's the first time in my entire life. So excuse me if I'm a little hyperbolic and overly optimistic. I look at the NBA. I covered the NBA at large for a couple of publications, so I had to watch all of the teams in order to get perspective, and I don't see anyone out there. There's no Duncan Spurs, no Kobe and Shaq, no Heatles, no Kevin Durant death lineup. Not yet. San Antonio is coming, and that's a dynasty for sure. But we have a 2-year window before they actualize, and this is it. And with Jalen Brunson, you always have a shot to win.
Dylan?
Yeah, a lot of what Lee said. I mean, I'm excited for this team. I think this is the most amount of hype / pressure / expectations, whatever you want to call it, that they've had really this entire century, and it definitely in my lifetime. You know, I'm only 23 years old. I have not witnessed really this kind of success with the Knicks team ever. So, you know, it's happy to say that we finally have a team where I firmly believe that they can win a title instead of just make the playoffs or anything like that. No, we want to take that step and actually win a championship, which, again, like I said, it's very surreal to think about just how far we've come because, you know, as Lee said, a lot of my time watching the Knicks, they've been putrid. They've been terrible. Okay. I'll just keep it blunt like that. They were awful for the longest of time, a laughing stock in the league. Like how, you know, if there's any Jets fans watching this, how you guys view the Jets right now, then that's how the Knicks were viewed back in the 2010s and all that stuff. So to see how far they've come now, to see the team they've built now, and to see that they finally have built a team that is actually able to compete with the best of the best in the league, that's exciting to see. Now, of course, there's going to be ups and downs in the season. I mean, every regular season has ups and downs. It's not going to be perfect 100% of the way through. I'm not expecting it to be perfect 100% of the way through. There will be times this year where they might struggle. There might be times where the offense looks, like crap, or the defense is not doing very good, or maybe people are going to start calling for Mike Brown's job if we lose 2 games in a row. Who knows what's going to happen with all that stuff? But the bottom line, the expectations that are being put on us now to win a title, it's a lot of pressure, but it's also something we need to realize is like a blessing to have, that we have a team we can root for that is that good, because we haven't really had a Knicks team be that good, at least in many of our lifetimes. And if you're, an older fan who witnessed all those 90s teams and they always came up just short in the NBA finals and in the playoffs and stuff, hopefully this is the year they finally break that. What is it, 52 years now that they haven't won a championship or something like that? A lot of us were not around for that. So hopefully this is the time they finally do it. And that's really all I got to say. I'm excited for this season. I'm excited to, also make content for all the people that do want to, see that stuff from me. And then obviously from Luca as well. I'm excited for it. This is going to be a fun season.
It is absolutely going to be a fun season, and I should really put a hashtag when I do my game stream Wednesday night. Push a hashtag Knicks or something for the Knicks. Hashtag Save Us, because they are the only hope left in New York. But a few housekeeping things real quick. If you guys haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so when I go live or drop a new video. It's all in the headline there. Also, please, please, please check out Lee's stuff. It's all in the description. His Twitter, where he writes different list of publications. Great writer. Dylan, Fireside Knicks, whether it's on the website, Empire Sports Media. Also, his YouTube channel is down below. His Twitter's down below. Same goes for my stuff. My Jets channel, I think, is down below there as well. But the next time I will be live, first of all, after a while, must I say, this was July, August, September, October. First time in 4 months, I think, going live. But regardless, to the point is that we are streaming Wednesday, Knicks Cavaliers, 7 o'clock p.m. Me and Donald will be streaming for the Knickscast channel, 7 o'clock p.m. start time. I am excited as much as you are. As I said, if you're new here, please hit the subscribe button. More important, check out the links down below. I'm hell excited for the Knicks as much as these two are. But Phil, what's up, bro? I haven't talked to you in a while. A salute from the Knicks Nightcap, Nick of Time family. Love Phil and Jigga. Two great brothers. But with that being said, folks, hit the subscribe button, do all the good stuff. Gonna get out of here, but always remember, go Knicks, hashtag New York forever. Peace. Have a good night.